Is Chris McAllister, and I'm the leader of the Academic Development Centre at the University of Sunderland in London. Thank you for coming to my talk on ChatGPT and AI, a campus-wide response, or, as it could be paraphrased, a tale of assessment, review and renewal told as heist movie. And all will be explained. So perhaps similar to Melinda's talk, my talk is going to be quite centred on ChatGPT and the assessment moment, and very much our engagement with, again, I know I'm using ChatGPT, it's like Hoover or Coke, I've just slipped into it, but I mean all other AIs that are available. Very much assessment focused, and I'm going to tell you very much our story of how we at our campus in London have responded and reacted and engaged with ChatGPT. My story is very much a kind of process story, a strategy story, and how as we, as I put it, educators in the liminal zone of higher education, educators very much part of the precariat of higher education, took on board the challenge and moved forward. So off we go. So today's presentation, or as it could be called, a 6-act heist movie. I'll begin, as any good heist movie does, the challenge. What's the bank we're going to take down? What's the vault we've got to get into? What was our challenge in Sunderland, London? 2, the theory, the background, the context. Some of you know me. Part of my career has been spent teaching politics and social science, and I couldn't resist. Let's try and connect up what we do to the sort of high theory of the social sciences. So we're going to leap into the world of Ulrich Beck's Risk Society in Act 2. Then we'll get back to reality, back down to earth. And we're going to look at Act 3, creating the team, affecting change, a team of combined talents. My team, the team couldn't be here today. There's 5 of them, 5 of us. It would have cost us about £1,500 to come up from London. There are other conferences and presenting, etc., etc. But it very much is a team event of combined talents. Part 4, Act 4, of course. Any heist movie has a plan. What was our plan? Then the bit you'll be waiting for, hopefully, part 5. What actually happened? What happened when the heist took place? To quote Donald Rumsfeld, known unknowns, unknown unknowns, and in the Sherlock Holmes reference, dogs that didn't bark. And then finally, what I want to finish on as a kind of twist in the tail, because we are telling this as a movie, what we learned from the liminal philosophy of being an EAP person and living in that liminal space. So there we are. And I'll add the odd reference to the slides. That's from the 1995 movie Heat. Okay, why the heist movie metaphor? What I wanted this talk to be about, and my preparation for it, and discussing this with my colleagues and getting their feedback as we put together this presentation, that it would be a reflection on how a learning development centre goes about us having an impact on our environment. Very much, how do we go from idea or concept or problem to policy to actually having an impact on students' lives and our colleagues' lives? So what is our process? I've drawn very much on this from the thoughts and comments of our excellent Pro-VC education at Sunderland, Abigail Moriarty, in terms of trying to projectize what we do. How we've moved over the last year very much at Sunderland, London, as the Academic Development Centre, into seeing what we do as a project, having a lifespan, having a life cycle. Okay, like a movie, having a story trajectory to control, steer, focus, and ultimately have a genuine impact, not just be words and ideas that never ever happen. And finally, I wanted to pick on the heist metaphor because a heist movie is, of course, also about assembling a complementary team of specialists. And you'll see here, this is very much a team story. This is not about me heroically leading the charge and using my wonderful intellect. It's a team story and it's a team event we do. So let's begin. Act 1, the challenge. What was the challenge? For us, very simply, it was that many of our programs were, if you like, what we could call classic written assessments, where the students are asked to read something, assimilate that information, and write something. And of course, we had a problem that started emerging in, we started January, February, the issue came to our attention. ChatGPT can do it in minutes or even seconds. what do? Will we face a scenario quite rapidly where some of our programs are essentially relatively meaningless? So that was a challenge. The image, by the way, is from Inside Man. Okay, the Sunderland London context. So there you have us. We're in Canary Wharf. There's a team of us doing our sprint project. There's me, Daniela, Latif, Fotios, and Vipin in action. The Sunderland London context. For us, time is of the essence. Why? Well, the reason is, I don't know if any of you are familiar with the London satellite campus market. It's intensely competitive. It's pretty ferocious. You have to have enough students coming through your doors if you're going to financially survive. So we have 4 intakes a year. Students start with us in October, January, April, August, October. Yeah, you get the picture, and we rotate again. So we have very limited time to operate in, bearing in mind we're afraid genuinely our assignments, our modules could start to be irrelevant, and very limited resources to make change happen. And finally, as a satellite campus, our sovereignty has its limits. Let me put it that way. So some of our modules and programs are wholly owned. Some of our modules and programs have sort of shared sovereignty with Sunderland, main campus. Some of them are wholly owned by Sunderland, and we're essentially doing that. So how can we make change happen? The problem is there, the challenge is real, but there are restrictions on what we can do. Okay, let's pause for a moment and step out. Act 2, AI, the latest iteration, perhaps, of Ulrich Beck's society. So sorry to break the narrative. Let's have a kind of flashback to the side, as you have in many movies. And let's perhaps pause and think how what's going on with GPT, and for us, certainly in Sunderland, fits into the wider idea of risk society. Now, Ulrich Beck, writing in the 80s and 90s, talked about how the defining feature of modern life is perhaps no longer class or identity. It's all about risk. Who is exposed to risk? Who's most at risk? The defining value in modern society being how can we protect people and avoid risk? Now, Beck talked about risk as being the risk we face today as being essentially human created. He had highlighted events such as the Chernobyl disaster, the attack on 9/11, various viruses and outbreaks we've suffered. So a human-made risk, we cause a problem, which is ultimately, of course, true of ChatGPT and AI. It didn't come from nature. Humans, people who'd worked in universities and learned at universities, created AI. Beck also highlights that risk in the modern world is an unknowable risk. It's not necessarily visible to our senses. So as Ulrich Beck pointed out in relation in his writings on Chernobyl, you may not know for decades that you've in fact got radiation poisoning. With smoking, until an expert tells you 30 years later, you've got cancer because you smoked 30 years ago, someone needs to tell you. And again, with ChatGPT and AI, unless you know or something is revealed to have been produced by ChatGPT AI, it might just be just another piece of student work. Beck also highlighted the idea that risk in the modern world defies and cuts through boundaries. It's not containable. It defies containable and traditional hard border responses. Beck picked up on this idea that for the modern state, you would slam down borders, you would defend those borders, you'd have armies and police, secure the state. Well, a lot of these risks, like radiation from Chernobyl, or some of the risks posed by non-state actor terror groups, for example, simply defies borders. And again, with ChatGPT, where do you put the borders? How do you contain it? I believe the Italian government briefly, I think in February, March, for 2 weeks, banned ChatGPT and then lifted the ban. Again, showing the borders were ineffective. So how does this connect to our world? So Beck's response to the risks of late modernity and ours, taking a cross-border trans-institutional response. We worked with our main campus, we worked with our colleagues, we reached out to colleagues across higher education. Collaboration, the key for us became working with colleagues across all programs at our institution. Accepting right from the start, as I think many of us have alluded to here, that hard border solutions are essentially bound to fail. And working towards an approach, and again, I quote our Pro DC, Abby Moriarty, making it difficult for students to fail, creating structures and directions that, if a student stays on the righteous path, will lead them passing, as opposed to creating structures and obstacles that make it more difficult for students to succeed. And part of what we were thinking in terms of, can we make it difficult for students to succeed if by purely relying on ChatGPT? Let's create a world with our assessments, use our assessments to create structures whereby student can use maybe ChatGPT for the reading, but ultimately they'll have to use themselves and their own intellect and their own creativity to succeed. So that was Beck. Let's get back to our main story. So Act 3, creating the team, combine talents. This happens in every heist movie. It happened in ours. So, Sunderland Academic Development Centre. This is something we've created ourselves. It's only 6 months old, where we've essentially pulled together a different group of individuals who at one stage were simply a group of people I happen to line manage into an academic development centre with an ethos, a philosophy, a purpose. And our thinking was, so we didn't see ChatGPT coming, that would give us the capacity to affect change and innovate with learning and teaching across the centre. So that's who we are. We've got personal academic tutors, we've got EAP lecturers, woo! We've got a library team, the library is part of our world. We've got digital learning technology leads, employability advocates, and we've got 5 senior lecturers, specialists in particular areas. I'll leave that for you to glance at. So our ChatGPT response team would come from these people, but everyone's of course occupied with their operational tasks on a routine basis, and everyone's teaching. So it's funneling it down and creating a mixed team of specialists. And here we go. Here's that moment where the team is revealed. So here they are. Sadly, they couldn't be here today. They did supply their pictures voluntary in case you're interested. So we have in the right corner with the pink tie, Theo, our assessment wizard, essentially. On the other side, we have Elisha, our employability specialism. For a satellite campus like ourselves, one of our key issues is embedding employability in the curriculum, so people are coming to us and having a very clear route about what they're going to do next with their lives. In the corner here, we have Giuseppe, enterprise and generally just fixing things. You know, people have different skills on a heist movie. And finally, we have our EAP person in the corner, Daniela, EAP and thinking, will be revealed on that. Evie, our digital person, isn't here, and I guess I produced, I'm not sure what I did or brought to it, but that was our team. This is what we're going forward with. So, Act 4, every heist movie has a plan. Here's the plan, here's the bit where they have a model and they tell you what we're going to do. Speed was our focus, working with our colleagues in the main campus at Sunderland. We worked on a sort of joint unified triage plan. And it became called in-flight changes. Changes we can make to the modules, to our programs, without necessarily going through the full panoply of bureaucratic processes you traditionally have at university. The 3 areas we focused on to try and change how we assess would be bring more formative assessment. One of the things I didn't say is, and why we felt our modules were a particular risk is, over time, we'd kind of evolved into an assessment strategy where more and more everything was happening on one assessment right at the end of the course. So the module I currently teach on, first year module, first term module, the students get a 3,000-word essay at the end. That's it. Traditionally, no other assessment. And we felt we wanted to sort of break that up to have more formative assessments to almost pull the students away from that end of course focus. Chunking of assessments. Can we break the assessments up into pieces so they happen across the semester and the students are building on that and reflecting? And then finally, can we create, as it were, alternative assessments where you might have an essay, and in addition to the essay, the student has to submit a reflective blog. Now, these are sort of starting point ideas. We're trying to work fast, and key was going to be buying in and getting collaboration from the program managers. So we've got 11 different programs covering everything from business, nursing, tourism, etc. And each of those has a program manager and they're key figures in this. Okay, our pivot point, and this is Theo's inspiration, let's think in terms of a sprint away day. It's a sort of, I think it's a social science and business idea, having a sprint session, you bring people together in one place, get them there, get the program teams into the same room. And what we did was, there's us in action, present the context, present the theory, present the opportunity, and we got the program teams to begin to rewrite their assessments live in those away day sessions. And there we are in action, breakout moments, etc. Okay, however, every heist movie has more than one storyline. And for us, and our agenda was, it was an opportunity to really rethink how as a campus we can redo and change assessment. So we're trying to move ourselves much more to an assessing to learn approach, not as assessment right at the end, but we're assessing to encourage and promote learning. Assessment much more linked to employability. 3,000-word essay, if you're looking at a career as a care manager, is possibly not the best preparation we can give you. Assessment and sustainable development goals. Why? Because we think it's vital in creating global citizens. 2, I believe the latest government benchmarks are saying degrees need to be investing in connecting to sustainable development. And finally, overall assessment that motivates, engages, and develops combined skills. So here we are at 5, 2 more to go. What actually happened between April and June 2023? That's our first sprint day. Look at the dramatic poses people are striking. I feel like Yusuf up there, like, yes, and what are you doing? Here we are at 5. What happened in April? Did we succeed? Well, the answer, of course, is yes. How we stood here otherwise. But all our programs went through the away day process. All the teams engaged. All teams have begun to develop and write in-flight changes. By June the 6th, we had actually sprinted all 11 teams. The changes are planned to be implemented from the 4th intake in August. However, I'm not going to stand here and say it was all wonderful, let's stop and be done. Nothing as simple as that. Key factors in our success, just to highlight: hard diplomacy, working with the program leaders, working with the program teams, pre-meetings to the pre-meetings, having well worked out materials and well-run sessions, giving the team freedom and organic approach. I must admit there were some suggestions for part of the content that I got mildly queasy about, but I was glad I got over my queasiness and let it happen, give people freedom. Crucially, what made it work was our colleagues who deliver the academic content in those programs. We were working with vested, curious, not just Melinda said in her presentation, open-minded and very courteous colleagues. So that became key to success. But known unknowns, challenges we knew were out there. We thought people might not fully grasp the risk, and that was the case with some programs. We thought we would have difficulties timetabling the away days while everybody else is responsible, everyone's teaching. That was a problem. Programs did need varying levels of intervention as we expected. Okay, so much. However, we encountered a pile of serious unknown unknowns, the challenges we didn't see coming. The sheer scale of the challenge logistically, actually organizing, it was 8 away days in the end for the 11 programs, logistically was a nightmare. Giuseppe, who became Mr. Logistics, is probably still recovering. We couldn't do it all on the day, despite Theo's ambitions of, no, Chris, we can sprint it in a day. No, we didn't finish it all in a day. Program teams have to be asked to go away and keep working on it. We'll pick up in a moment. In effect, we've created an exponential crisis for ourselves. Work makes more work, not more work. It's a process that's opened and ongoing and is going to keep going. This is one I didn't see, and it's really worrying me. Team burnout, training fatigue. We've done a lot of this. We've been actually sort of pausing what we do. We all got pretty tired of doing this. Resistance and denial at higher levels. I didn't see this one coming. Once the reality of how many changes our professional services and admin people did start to get a bit traumatized by this. After urging us to make changes and engage, the reality of how much work and the fact that we're perhaps leading the initiative was less comfortable. And then finally, a lot of follow-up work, turning this into documentation, getting this on spreadsheets. We're still working on that. Dogs that didn't bark. Oh, Robert Stevens as Sherlock Holmes there. We didn't have outright opposition to the project. I did wonder, would we have a program that would simply say, we're not cooperating? That didn't happen. The kind of, how dare you guys tell us about our program, about our subject, didn't happen. And I think that was down to a lot of the hard diplomatic work my colleagues were doing in pre-meetings. We didn't have any calls to simply ban aid. So that's what happened. Where next? Godfather 2 reference there. Part 2, a stronger sequel. So where we're going next is from Project Sprint, as we've called it, to a marathon. It's opening out, it's getting longer. Sprint Part 2 will be longer, deeper. We're widening out who we engage with. If I have one regret from Sprint, one is that there was relatively little engagement with students or the students' union or the student voice. We're going to remedy that in Sprint 2 when we start in August. And finally, we have secured Vice Chancellor Award funding to do this. Woohoo! So we got the money for that. That only came on Monday. Okay, what would Ulrich Beck have to say? I like to think he would give us a B+ for our solutions. We've been collaborative. We've taken a trans-borders approach. We've recognized the hazard can't simply be wished away or simply banned. However, I think Ulrich Beck would probably say, be careful what you wish for, because time and time again, the works of humans generate more problems, more risks. Okay, I have one final act to go, the twist in the tail. Act 6, liminality, EAP, and higher education. The twist at the end of our movie, and appropriate enough, 2 images from The Usual Suspects. Without giving away any spoilers, if you haven't seen them. Okay, I wanted to finish by reflecting on the liminality of EAP, the liminality of HE. And liminality is this idea that certain, in the social world, certain things, practices, professions, people exist between boundaries, exist in those uncertain gray zones, those uncertain places. And let's face it, I think many of us might agree that EAP has traditionally been a liminal and precarious space where there's uncertainty. Perhaps we could argue increasingly HE is becoming a liminal high-risk space. Certainly the London satellite campus sector is, oh yes. Now this may well be changing. The work of many people in this room, and you see me referencing the books of B. Bond and Alex Sting, to try and perhaps stabilize, entrench, give some solidity and sort of assert ourselves more as EAP practitioners. That work is going on and on and on, for good or for ill. However, on my sort of finishing note, I think one of the things that prepared me and some of my colleagues for Project Sprint was experience of the opportunity and hazard of the liminal maybe has helped us to adapt. So my finishing 2 slides are, we have Franklin Roosevelt and Theodore Roosevelt, politicians who thrived in liminal precarious spaces. And to finish, any questions? And because Giuseppe is organizing this and won't let me get away with otherwise, if you are in London on the 18th or 19th of July, come to our Learning and Teaching Symposium in Canary Wharf. You can drop by for free, see what we do. Thank you very much, everyone.